May sat quietly in her faded armchair, the soft hum of the television filling the empty spaces of her small living room. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through lace curtains, casting delicate shadows on the worn carpet. It was a typical Tuesday, yet something inside her felt heavier than usual. At 67, May had learned the art of blending into the background, like a ghost in the house she once called full of laughter and life. Her hands rested on her lap, weathered from years of teaching and caring for others, now trembling slightly with age and solitude. The calendar on the wall reminded her it had been nearly 5 years since her husband passed, and even longer since she'd felt the rush of purpose. A faded photo beside the TV showed her younger self, vibrant and full of dreams, teaching children with the kind of energy that now seemed like a lifetime away. May sighed, the weight of regret settling around her like dust. Could it really be that this was all there was? A slow fade into quiet invisibility. As the news anchor's voice broke through the silence, May's ears perked up. The segment was about Elon Musk, the visionary entrepreneur who had pushed the limits of space, electric cars, and technology itself. But today's story wasn't about rockets or Mars colonies. It was about a new invention, a neural stimulator designed to unlock the human brain's dormant potential, specifically targeting those in the later decades of life. The scientists were speechless, the report claimed, because this device could reverse the decline many accepted as inevitable with age. May's heart quickened. Could this be real? Was it possible that everything she believed about growing old, the slow loss of mind, body, and relevance, was about to be challenged? She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen where Elon Musk appeared in a casual interview, his words sharp and fearless. Age is a number, not a boundary. We're redefining what's possible at every stage of life. For the first time in a long time, May felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to hope for, possibility. The question burned in her mind, what if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? That simple yet profound idea set off a chain reaction inside her. What if she wasn't done? What if she still had untapped strength and dreams waiting to be reclaimed? May grabbed her phone and hesitated, then typed a quick message into a local community forum. Has anyone tried the new neural stimulator Elon Musk is talking about? Could this really change how we age? She paused and then added, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the message sent, May realized how long it had been since she reached out like this, not to family, not to old friends, but to the world beyond her lonely walls. The screen flickered back to Elon's interview, where he spoke about failure and risk, about breaking free from limitations and daring to reinvent yourself. May thought of the novel she had always wanted to write, the dreams she had shelved for decades. Could this invention be the spark that reignited her? The very idea sent a thrill through her veins, mingled with a shadow of doubt. She was old, wasn't she? Too old to start over. Yet the very presence of that thought felt like a cage she was beginning to question. She switched off the TV, her mind racing but her body already lighter, as if a door had cracked open after years of being sealed shut. Outside, the wind rustled the autumn leaves, and May stood, stretching muscles that ached but still obeyed her command. Maybe today was the moment everything changed. Maybe she was ready to find out. May's days before that moment were marked by quiet routine and the slow erosion of her sense of self. She had been a schoolteacher for nearly 40 years in a small Midwestern town where everyone knew each other's names and histories. Her classroom had once been a place of laughter, curiosity, and possibility, where she inspired young minds to dream beyond their circumstances. But retirement had brought silence. The school bell no longer called her to action, and the children's voices faded from her life like the last colors of a sunset. Her house, once filled with the sounds of family, now echoed with the absence of her husband, Harold, whose steady presence had anchored her for decades. He had been gone for nearly 5 years now, a quiet loss that deepened with each passing season. May kept his favorite chair in the living room, a small shrine to memories she wasn't ready to let go. Their children had grown and moved to distant cities, busy with lives that rarely included phone calls or visits. She was proud of them, yes, but loneliness wrapped around her like a thick fog. May often caught herself tracing the lines on old photographs, the ones where she smiled with hope, not the weary resignation that now softened her features. Regret was a constant companion. She thought about the novel she never finished, the story she had dreamed of writing since her 20s but set aside for family, work, and the endless demands of daily life. It was a manuscript buried under decades of what-ifs and too-laters. Sometimes she read parts of it, now tattered and dog-eared, feeling the sharp sting of dreams deferred. One memory, in particular, held her captive, a day from her youth, teaching a class of lively third-graders. She could almost smell the chalk dust and hear the squeak of shoes on linoleum floors. That memory symbolized everything she had lost, a version of herself radiant with energy and purpose. May's body betrayed her with aches and stiffness that made even simple tasks challenging. She walked slower, tired easier, and sometimes felt invisible even when in a room full of people. The mirror told her stories she tried not to listen to: faded skin, silver hair, eyes that had seen too much waiting. Her doctor often urged her to slow down, reminding her gently that her body was no longer the temple it once was. But inside May, a flicker of rebellion lived quietly, refusing to accept that fading away was her destiny. Despite all, she maintained a fragile optimism, a stubborn thread woven through her days that maybe, somehow, she still mattered. Yet, the weight of time pressed heavily on her spirit. May's children worried about her, their voices tinged with concern and frustration when they urged her to take it easy or stop chasing old dreams. They didn't understand that May's heart beat still with unspoken ambitions. Their skepticism often felt like a wall, isolating her further. She longed for connection but feared being seen as a burden or a relic of the past. In those quiet moments, when loneliness settled deep into her bones, May wondered if anyone really cared about the stories and lives of people like her, those who had given so much and now found themselves pushed to the sidelines. Yet, even in the darkest moments, there was a spark. A small voice inside whispered that life could still surprise her, that the fire of creation and change didn't have to die with age. That voice was fragile, often drowned out by doubt and fatigue, but it was there. It was this voice that pulled her to the screen that afternoon when Elon Musk's words pierced through the silence. That voice that dared to ask the impossible: what if this was only the beginning? May's life before that moment was marked by routines, missed chances, and quiet desperation, but also by an unbroken will to find meaning. And now, standing at the threshold of something unknown, she felt the weight of her years but also the stirring of a new chapter. A chance to reclaim the self she thought she had lost. The past was a shadow, yes, but it was also the foundation on which she could build again. May closed her eyes and whispered a promise to herself: she would try. Not because she was certain, but because she was brave enough to hope. May's mind became a battlefield, a war waged between hope and fear, between the yearning to change and the voice of doubt whispering that it was too late. The skepticism was relentless, not just from the world around her but from within. Every morning she woke with a familiar question gnawing at her: is it really possible to start over at her age? Is anyone even paying attention anymore? The small victories of her daily walks, the few pages she managed to write, often felt like drops in an ocean of insignificance. Her children's words echoed in her ears, tinged with concern but heavy with disbelief. "Mom, you should slow down. It's not healthy to push yourself so hard." Her son, Tom, called one afternoon, his voice gentle but firm. "We worry about you. You're not a young woman anymore. You don't have to prove anything." May's heart ached with the tension. She wanted their support, but she also needed permission to break free from the narrative that aging meant stepping back, retreating, and giving up. On the other hand, society's subtle dismissals weighed on her. Conversations around her often skirted topics of aging with uncomfortable silence or pity. The culture seemed to have written off people like May, locking them away in homes, in memories, or in roles defined by what they once were rather than what they could still become. It was in this space of doubt and loneliness that Elon Musk's voice found its way back into her thoughts. She had replayed the interview countless times, searching for that spark that might ignite her next step. His defiance of limits, his willingness to fail spectacularly and try again, resonated deeply. "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor," he had said. That phrase became a mantra for May, a shield against the creeping defeatism. Yet even with this new resolve, the internal war raged fiercely. Some days she woke energized, scribbling notes furiously, imagining the possibilities that Musk's invention might unlock. Other days, her body ached with exhaustion, and the fear that she was chasing a fantasy threatened to swallow her hope whole. To complicate matters, the local doctor who had cared for May for years delivered gentle warnings at every visit. "May, I admire your spirit, but please remember to listen to your body. You don't want to risk injury or burnout." His words were practical but felt like shackles to her restless soul. One afternoon, after a particularly discouraging checkup, May sat alone on her porch, the weight of those conflicting messages pressing down. Was she foolish to believe in this new path? Could she really rewrite her story, or was she just prolonging an inevitable decline? That night, scrolling through her phone, May stumbled across a podcast featuring Elon Musk discussing failure and resilience. She listened intently as he spoke candidly about his early setbacks, rockets that exploded, businesses that nearly collapsed, critics who said he was dreaming too big or too foolish. "I'm not afraid of failure," he said. "I'm afraid of not trying." Those words struck a chord that reverberated deep inside May. She realized that the greatest risk was surrendering without a fight. Inspired, she decided to try the simplest exercise Musk recommended with his invention, a basic mental stimulation practice designed to challenge memory and focus. It was difficult. She stumbled, frustrated by forgotten words and slow recall. The shadows of doubt crept in. Was this the best she could do? Yet, the glimmer of progress was undeniable. Each small success was a beacon. The inner war was not a single battle but a series of skirmishes, each one testing her resolve. As days turned to weeks, May felt herself growing stronger, mentally and emotionally. The harsh voices, external and internal, began to fade just enough to hear the quiet rhythm of her own heartbeat, steady and unyielding. She wasn't alone in this fight. Across the country, others her age faced the same doubts and dismissals, their stories often untold. Yet Elon Musk's invention was creating ripples of change, a challenge to the accepted narrative of aging. It was as if a door had opened to a room many thought locked forever. May's inner war was far from over, but for the first time in years, she believed she might emerge victorious. She closed her eyes one evening, whispering a vow, "I will not let fear win. I will fight for this new life, no matter how hard it gets." The battle was hers to fight, and she was ready. May awoke the next morning with a restless energy she hadn't felt in years. The early sunlight spilled softly through her bedroom window, casting golden streaks across the faded quilt that had once been a wedding gift. Today was different. Instead of sinking into the easy comfort of old routines, she found herself lacing up her worn sneakers, hands slightly trembling with anticipation and nerves. The walk she'd postponed for weeks was finally happening. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive and fearless pursuit of what others deemed impossible, May decided to make one small but bold change, a daily walk to reconnect with her body and mind. Outside, the crisp autumn air greeted her, filling her lungs with a bracing freshness that stirred her dormant senses. Leaves crunched beneath her feet as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, each step a quiet rebellion against the years of inactivity and self-doubt. With every footfall, May felt a subtle shift, as if she was shaking off invisible chains and rediscovering a part of herself she thought lost forever. Walking became more than exercise, it was a ritual, a daily testament to her decision to refuse fading quietly into the background. In the evenings, she began to journal her experiences, scribbled notes on aging, hope, and the quiet courage it took to begin again. Inspired by Musk's example of turning failures into fuel, May documented both her struggles and small victories, a digital diary she shared hesitantly on a local online forum for seniors seeking connection. At first, her posts received only polite encouragements from a few neighbors, but then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Mrs. Jacobs, the elderly widow next door, stopped May on her walk and said, "I see the light back in your eyes. You're reminding me that it's never too late to try." The moment stirred something deep within May, a mix of validation and warmth. The small change she'd made wasn't just about her, it was creating ripples in the lives of others. Encouraged, May pushed further. She opened a blog titled Reinventing May, where she shared reflections on aging, snippets of her unfinished novel, and lessons drawn from Elon Musk's fearless mindset. The blog was humble, a modest space, but it became a beacon of hope for readers who felt similarly stuck or invisible. Comments poured in from strangers who related to her struggles and admired her courage. One reader wrote, "You make me believe I can still dream, even at 70. Another shared, "Thank you for showing us that age is not the end, but a new beginning." These words fueled May's spirit more than she expected. She realized the choice to walk, to write, to reach out had ignited a purpose she thought the years had stolen. Yet, the journey wasn't without its challenges. Some days, aches in her joints reminded her of limits, and the inner voice of doubt whispered she was foolish to hope for more. Family visits sometimes brought gentle warnings cloaked in love. Her daughter worried May was pushing too hard, her son skeptical about the blog's impact. But May held firm, learning to balance caution with courage. Each small step became a victory against the narrative that aging meant fading away. The invention Elon Musk had introduced remained a distant promise, but his mindset had already changed May's trajectory. She felt, for the first time in years, that she was not waiting for life to happen to her. She was actively choosing to live it differently. One crisp evening, May sat on her porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands, the sky painted with streaks of pink and purple. She reread a comment on her blog from a young woman facing her own struggles. "Your words gave me the strength to keep going. Thank you for being brave." May smiled through tears. The one thing she changed wasn't a grand invention or a sweeping transformation, it was a simple act of movement and expression. It was choosing to walk forward, literally and figuratively, into an uncertain but hopeful future. In that moment, May understood that change didn't have to be loud or immediate to be powerful. It was the steady steps, the consistent courage, the willingness to begin again that mattered most. Inspired by Elon Musk's fearless defiance of limits, May's journey had shifted from fading into obscurity to blazing a quiet trail of renewal. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." And with that, she rose from the porch swing, ready to greet the new day with a heart wide open and feet determined to keep moving forward. May's small but determined steps began to gather momentum, and with them came moments that felt both fragile and fierce, victories carved from vulnerability. One crisp morning, as she sat at her cluttered desk, the glow of dawn filtering through her kitchen window, she opened her laptop and stared at the blinking cursor on the final page of her long-forgotten manuscript. It had been more than 30 years since she last put pen to paper with intent to finish the story she dreamed of writing since her youth. Now, fueled by the courage inspired by Elon Musk's radical mindset and her newfound daily discipline, May decided it was time. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, memories of doubt and fear whispering, "Why bother? Who will care?" But she pressed on, word by word, breathing life into the characters she had once abandoned. Hours slipped by unnoticed as she wrote with an urgency born of rediscovery. This wasn't just a story, it was her reclamation, a way to prove that age was not a cage but a door. The days turned into weeks, and May found herself waking earlier, eager to write, to share, to build a legacy she had thought lost forever. Her blog, Reinventing May, grew steadily, followers drawn not just to her words but to the raw authenticity with which she shared her struggles and triumphs. Then came the unexpected, a message from her daughter, Emily, after years of strained silence. "Mom, I read your blog. I'm proud of you." The words hit May with the force of a tidal wave, a mixture of joy, relief, and a lingering ache for lost time. She typed back slowly, unsure how to bridge the gap years of distance had created. Their conversation opened a door May hadn't dared knock on for decades. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, a fragile thread reconnecting fractured family ties. The breakthrough extended beyond May's personal life. One morning, a local newspaper reached out, intrigued by the story of a 67-year-old woman challenging the stereotypes of aging with the spirit of Elon Musk as her inspiration. The feature painted May not as a relic but as a Renaissance woman, a symbol of hope and resilience. Her story struck a chord in the community, sparking conversations in senior centers, book clubs, and cafes. People saw themselves in her struggle and found courage in her journey. The greatest surprise came when a video of May reading an excerpt from her novel went viral online. Strangers from across the country left comments filled with admiration and inspiration. Some shared their own stories of late-life reinvention, creating a ripple effect May never imagined possible. Yet, the breakthrough was not without pain. Memories of lost years and missed opportunities haunted her quiet moments. Tears came unbidden as she grappled with the bittersweet truth that some wounds run deep and healing takes time. But in vulnerability, May found strength. She learned that breaking through was not a single moment of triumph but an ongoing process of facing fears, embracing imperfections, and choosing hope. One evening, standing beneath a sky full of stars, May reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She realized that she was not the same woman who had felt invisible and defeated just months ago. She was reborn through small, courageous acts inspired by a man who dared to defy limits at any age. "I was never too old," she whispered to the night. "I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And in that permission, May found freedom, a freedom that radiated from her like the dawn, promising new beginnings and the endless possibilities that come with embracing life fully, no matter the years behind you. May sat quietly in her favorite chair, the afternoon light soft against her face, reflecting on the whirlwind that had become her life over the past months. The world she once thought had written her off was now watching, listening, and learning from her story. What began as a small act, a daily walk inspired by Elon Musk's defiant words about age and possibility, had blossomed into a movement, a ripple that touched lives far beyond the walls of her modest home. Her blog, once a humble outlet for personal reflections, had become a platform where countless others shared their own journeys of reinvention and hope. May smiled softly, the weight of loneliness lifting like mist under the morning sun. The phone calls from friends and strangers alike reminded her that she was not invisible, her story mattered. But more than that, May realized her true legacy was not just the words she wrote or the connections she made, it was the transformation within herself. She remembered the fear that had gripped her in the beginning, the question that haunted her, was it too late? The answer had come slowly, woven through moments of courage, doubt, failure, and breakthrough. She was no longer waiting for permission to matter. She mattered because she chose to matter. In quiet moments, May often reflected on Elon Musk's influence, not as a savior but as a catalyst, a symbol of radical possibility. His relentless questioning of limits, his refusal to accept the status quo, had sparked a fire within her that burned brighter with each passing day. Through his example, she had learned that the boundaries we accept are often the ones we create for ourselves. One afternoon, May's daughter Emily visited, the tension between them softened by months of tentative healing. They sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and even tears, building a new foundation from the fragile pieces of the past. Emily admitted she had been wrong to doubt her mother's journey. "You've taught me that it's never too late to rewrite your story," she said, her voice filled with admiration. May's heart swelled with a quiet pride. Her legacy was not just the novel she finally finished or the blog that inspired thousands, it was the restoration of love and trust within her family. The town where May lived began to notice the change too. Community centers invited her to speak, seniors gathered to hear her story and share their own, and local libraries hosted workshops on creativity and resilience for older adults. What once felt like a private battle had become a collective triumph. May often thought about the invention Elon Musk introduced, the neural stimulator that promised to unlock hidden potential in aging brains. Though she never got to try it herself, she saw the invention as a metaphor for the power of choice and mindset. Technology could offer tools, but the true change came from within, from the courage to take the first step, the willingness to embrace vulnerability, and the refusal to accept limitations imposed by society or self. One evening, May penned a final blog post titled, "My New Legacy." In it, she wrote, "I thought this was the end of my story, but it was just a new beginning. We are never too old to dream, to create, to connect. Age is not a barrier but a gateway to wisdom, strength, and possibility." As she published the post, May felt a profound sense of peace. Her journey had transformed her from a woman who felt forgotten and powerless into a beacon of hope for others navigating the complexities of aging. Her legacy was living proof that the human spirit, when ignited by courage and fueled by purpose, could break through any barrier. May closed her laptop and gazed out the window at the fading light. The world outside was vast and full of unknowns, but she was ready. She was ready because she had discovered something far greater than youth or fame. She had discovered herself. "I was never too old," May whispered to the gathering dusk. "I was just waiting to believe I mattered." And with that, she embraced the quiet strength that had carried her through, stepping forward into the endless possibilities of the life still to come. May's transformation did not stop with her writing or her renewed family ties. As spring approached, the town began to stir with new energy, much like May herself. She found herself drawn into community projects she had once shied away from, offering her voice and her time to causes that mattered. Inspired by Elon Musk's pioneering spirit and relentless pursuit of progress, May volunteered at the local maker space, a small workshop where people of all ages tinkered, built, and dreamed. The place smelled of sawdust and solder, alive with the hum of possibility. May wasn't sure what she could contribute at first, her hands shaky and unfamiliar with the tools strewn across the workbenches. But slowly, with patience and practice, she began to learn. She built a small wooden planter box, then helped design a raised garden bed for the community center. Each project was a reminder that creation was not reserved for the young or the expert, it was a gift anyone could claim. The other volunteers, many decades younger, treated her not as an outsider but as a source of wisdom and encouragement. Her stories of resilience and reinvention became a quiet beacon that inspired them as much as she was inspired by their energy and curiosity. This unexpected camaraderie bridged generational gaps and shattered May's lingering sense of isolation. The maker space became a second home, a place where age was irrelevant and only passion mattered. One afternoon, during a brainstorming session, a younger volunteer named Jake shared news about a national contest for inventors and creators aged 60 and above. The grand prize was a grant to develop a project that could improve lives. May's heart quickened. Could this be the moment to bring Elon Musk's invention, or at least the mindset behind it, closer to home? Encouraged by Jake and others, May decided to enter. She proposed a simple but ambitious idea inspired by her own journey, a device designed to help seniors engage in mental and physical exercises through interactive technology, combining memory games, movement prompts, and social connection tools. It wasn't a high-tech invention like Musk's, but it was practical, grounded in real experience. Over the next weeks, May dedicated herself to the project, sketching designs, learning basic coding, and collaborating with the young volunteers who helped bring her vision to life. The process was daunting and humbling. There were moments of frustration, when the technology refused to cooperate or her hands trembled too much to complete a task. But May kept pushing forward, fueled by the belief that it was never too late to build something meaningful. The community rallied around her. Local businesses donated materials, the senior center offered space for testing, and neighbors volunteered as early users. Word spread, and soon the project was more than just May's dream, it was a shared mission to redefine what aging could look like. When the day of the contest arrived, May presented her invention with a mixture of nerves and pride. She spoke candidly about her journey, the doubts she faced, and how Elon Musk's fearless refusal to accept limits had sparked her courage. The judges listened intently, moved by her authenticity and the tangible impact her invention promised. Though May didn't win the grand prize, the exposure opened doors she hadn't imagined. A small tech startup reached out, offering to partner with her to refine the device and bring it to a wider audience. For May, this was more than a business opportunity, it was a chance to amplify a message of hope and empowerment to countless others. As she navigated this new chapter, May felt the full circle of her transformation. The woman who once sat alone, uncertain and invisible, was now a leader, a creator, a bridge between generations. She understood deeply that legacy was not about fame or fortune, but about inspiring others to see themselves differently. The invention, while humble compared to Musk's space rockets or electric cars, was a testament to the power of courage, curiosity, and relentless hope. May often thought back to the moment she first heard Elon Musk speak about failure and resilience. His words had been a spark, her journey had become the flame. She smiled to herself, knowing the road ahead was still full of unknowns. But for the first time in a long time, those unknowns felt like invitations rather than threats. May's life was no longer a story of fading light but of rising dawn. And with each new day, she chose to build, to connect, and to inspire, proof that no matter the years behind, the best invention was the one still unfolding inside her own heart. May's mornings grew brighter with purpose, the quiet of her small house filling with the soft clatter of keyboard clicks as she worked to refine the prototype of her invention. Each day felt like a step further from the shadows of doubt and closer to a horizon she once thought unreachable. The partnership with the tech startup was tentative but promising. The engineers respected her lived experience, listening closely as she described the needs and hopes of seniors who, like her, longed for meaningful connection and mental engagement. The project was no longer just a device, it became a symbol of resilience, a tangible answer to the silent question May had wrestled with for so long: what if aging was not the end, but a new beginning? There were moments when frustration gnawed at her, the complicated jargon, the technical glitches, the long hours of testing that left her exhausted. But May held tight to Elon Musk's fierce mindset: failure was a stepping stone, not a wall. She reminded herself daily, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. Her blog updates grew richer, detailing both setbacks and small victories, painting a raw, honest portrait of reinvention in action. Readers poured in with encouragement and shared their own stories of transformation. May realized she wasn't alone, an entire community was awakening alongside her. The local makerspace became a hub of creativity and intergenerational collaboration, echoing with laughter and conversation as volunteers worked side by side. May cherished these moments, the spark of new friendships, the exchange of ideas, the shared belief that age was not a limit but a resource. Outside, spring's first blooms pushed through the thawing earth, mirroring May's own growth. One afternoon, a surprise visit from her daughter Emily brought both joy and reflection. Over tea in the sunlit kitchen, Emily spoke candidly about her own struggles balancing family and career, confessing how May's journey had inspired her to rethink what it meant to grow older. "You've shown me that strength doesn't fade with age, it just looks different," Emily said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. The moment was tender and healing, a testament to the power of shared vulnerability. As the invention neared completion, May and the startup team organized a pilot program at the local senior center. The room buzzed with excitement as seniors tested the device, laughing over memory games, challenging each other to complete movement prompts, and sharing stories sparked by interactive prompts. May watched with a swelling heart as lives began to shift, connections rekindled, and hope blossomed in the eyes of her peers. One elderly man, previously withdrawn, smiled wide as he successfully navigated a challenging puzzle. A woman with arthritis marveled at the gentle exercises designed to accommodate her mobility. It was more than technology, it was empowerment. The experience crystallized May's conviction that her purpose extended far beyond personal healing. She was part of a movement rewriting the narrative of aging, fueled by courage, creativity, and a refusal to be sidelined. At night, May reflected on how far she'd come, from the despair of feeling forgotten to the triumph of breaking through barriers. Elon Musk's invention had sparked her journey, but the real invention was the life she was now crafting with intention and heart. The future was no longer a shadow but a canvas. I was never too old, May whispered to the stars outside her window. I was just waiting to believe I could still make a difference. And with that belief burning bright, May stepped boldly into the next chapter of her remarkable story. May's world had expanded beyond what she ever imagined possible. The device she helped create, once just a hopeful idea scribbled in her journal, was now rolling out to communities across the state. Each shipment brought stories of renewed spirit, letters from seniors who found joy in the simple act of remembering a childhood song or connecting with a neighbor through a shared challenge. May traveled to speak at conferences and senior centers, her voice steady yet tender as she shared her journey. She told audiences about the moment Elon Musk's words pierced her doubts, the small daily walk that became a rebellion, the choice to write and create despite fear. She wasn't just a speaker, she was a living testament that change could come at any age. One chilly morning, May found herself in a large auditorium packed with hundreds of faces, mostly seniors, but also caregivers, family members, and curious younger people drawn by the promise of hope. She stood behind the podium, nerves fluttering but heart steady. "What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong?" she began, echoing the question that had ignited her own transformation. The room was silent, hanging on her every word. May spoke of fear and invisibility, the crushing weight of loneliness and regret, but also of resilience, love, and the radical possibility of reinvention. She shared how a spark from a man who dared to defy limits, Elon Musk, had given her permission to matter again. After the talk, a line of people formed to thank her. Among them was a man in his 70s named Carl, who confessed that he had given up on his passion for painting years ago. "You reminded me it's never too late to create," he said, eyes shining. May smiled, a deep warmth flooding her chest. She thought about how far she had come, from a woman afraid to take a step, to a catalyst inspiring others to move forward. But the journey was still unfolding. Back home, May returned to her writing with renewed vigor. She began drafting a memoir, not just her story, but a tapestry of voices from those she'd met along the way. Their stories wove together, creating a chorus of hope and courage that transcended age and circumstance. Late one evening, May received an unexpected email from a research team studying cognitive decline. They wanted to collaborate, using her invention as a tool to explore new therapies for memory loss. The prospect thrilled and humbled her. It was proof that her small act of courage could ripple into something much greater. As spring turned to summer, May found herself increasingly reflective. She wandered through her garden, the scent of jasmine heavy in the warm air, and thought about the legacy she was building. It was not a monument or a trophy, but a living, breathing movement, a testament to the power of one person's refusal to fade quietly. One afternoon, May sat with her daughter Emily beneath the old oak tree in the backyard. They talked about dreams, fears, and the meaning of time. "You changed not just your life, but mine," Emily said softly. "You taught me that growing older isn't about losing, but about discovering." May's eyes shimmered with tears of gratitude. She realized that the invention Elon Musk had sparked was never just about technology. It was about the invention of possibility, the reshaping of a mindset that had trapped so many in fear and resignation. May knew her journey was far from over, but she faced the future with open arms and an unshakable belief that age was just a number, not a sentence. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, May whispered to herself, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to find my spark." And with that spark blazing inside her, May embraced the endless horizon ahead, ready to inspire the next chapter, not just for herself, but for all who dared to dream beyond the limits of time. May woke to the gentle hum of summer morning light filtering through the lace curtains. Her house, once a quiet refuge of memories and solitude, now pulsed with the energy of a life renewed. The invention she helped bring to life had taken root in communities near and far, and with it, so had a profound sense of purpose within her. As she stretched and sipped her coffee, May's thoughts drifted to the path that had led her here, the days when hope seemed a distant flicker, the moments when doubt whispered that it was too late. But each step forward, fueled by Elon Musk's fearless example, had chipped away at those shadows. Today, May was preparing for a new challenge, an invitation to collaborate with a university research center dedicated to aging and neuroplasticity. The partnership promised to take her invention beyond simple engagement tools to something that could potentially change scientific understanding of the aging brain. The very idea filled May with both excitement and humility. Driving to the university campus later that morning, May marveled at how different her life had become. The young researchers greeted her warmly, their respect evident in the way they listened to her stories and ideas. In a sleek lab filled with the quiet whir of machines and the glow of computer screens, May found herself surrounded by minds eager to learn not just from textbooks but from lived experience. They explained how the device could be integrated with new neural feedback technology, inspired by Musk's groundbreaking work in brain-computer interfaces. The thought that a small invention sparked by a woman's courage could become part of a cutting-edge study was surreal. Over the next weeks, May immersed herself in the collaboration, attending sessions, providing feedback, and witnessing the slow but steady progress of the project. She learned new terms, embraced the complexity of science, and became a bridge between the clinical and the personal, translating the jargon into stories of hope for seniors around her. Outside the lab, life continued to unfold with unexpected gifts. May's blog followers grew steadily, their messages filled with gratitude and stories of their own reinventions. A young woman named Sarah wrote from Texas, describing how May's journey had inspired her to reconnect with her grandfather, rekindling a bond thought lost. Letters poured in, weaving a tapestry of human connection that transcended distance and age. One afternoon, May received a call from Emily. Their conversations had become more frequent, their relationship blossoming into something both familiar and new. Emily shared news of her own growth, her struggles balancing career and motherhood, and how May's example had helped her embrace imperfection and resilience. They planned a family reunion, a long-awaited chance to rebuild what time had worn thin. May's heart swelled with anticipation and nervousness. The reunion became a symbol of healing, a gathering where old wounds were acknowledged and new memories forged. Around the dinner table, stories flowed, laughter echoed, and tears mingled with smiles. May watched her grandchildren play, their energy a vivid reminder of life's endless cycles. Through it all, she held fast to the lesson Elon Musk had instilled in her, the courage to question limits and the willingness to leap into the unknown. One evening, as twilight draped the sky in violet hues, May sat alone on her porch, gazing at the stars. The past and future intertwined in her thoughts, regrets softened by growth, fears replaced by hope. She whispered to the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to see that the journey was mine to create." In that quiet moment, May understood that her true invention was not a device or a blog post, but the relentless spirit that refused to be defined by age or circumstance. She was a living testament to the power of reinvention, a beacon for all who felt lost or forgotten. The road ahead was still unknown, but May faced it with open arms and a fearless heart, ready to inspire, to create, and to live fully, no matter the years behind her. May's days had settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and electrifying. The collaboration with the university had opened doors she never imagined walking through, doors lined with opportunity, learning, and purpose. Each morning she awoke with a quiet resolve to keep pushing boundaries, not just for herself but for everyone who had ever felt sidelined by age. Yet beneath the surface of progress, old fears sometimes whispered in the shadows. Was this new life sustainable? Could she maintain the momentum she had fought so hard to build? One particularly rainy afternoon, May found herself alone in her workshop at the maker space, the steady drip of water against the windows mirroring her restless thoughts. She stared at the half-finished components of the device, her fingers tracing the smooth edges as memories flooded back, the woman she had been, the years of silence and invisibility, and the spark that had ignited it all. Elon Musk's voice echoed in her mind, "Persistence is very important. "You should not give up unless you are forced to give up." Those words, once just inspiration, had become a mantra she lived by. May realized that persistence wasn't about never feeling doubt or fear. It was about moving forward despite them. With renewed determination, she dove back into her work, tweaking designs, testing functions, and collaborating closely with the researchers. The device evolved, becoming more intuitive, responsive, and empowering for its users. Meanwhile, her blog transformed as well. May began sharing not just triumphs but the raw, unfiltered moments, the days when hope felt fragile, when setbacks threatened to unravel progress. Readers responded with empathy and strength, creating a community bonded by vulnerability and courage. One letter stood out among many. It was from George, a retired teacher living hundreds of miles away, who wrote about how May's story had inspired him to reconnect with his estranged son. "Your words gave me the courage to reach out," he wrote. "For the first time in years, we spoke, and it was like the years melted away." May's heart swelled with the quiet joy of knowing her journey was creating ripples of healing beyond what she could see. Then came the day the university announced preliminary findings. The device showed promise not only in engaging seniors but in slowing cognitive decline for those at risk of dementia. The news spread quickly, drawing attention from medical professionals, caregivers, and media alike. May was invited to speak at a major conference, joining scientists and innovators to share the human story behind the technology. Standing on the stage, bathed in soft light, May felt the weight of the moment, the journey from silence to voice, from isolation to community. She spoke of fear and hope, of failure and persistence, weaving Elon Musk's ethos into a message that resonated deeply. Afterward, an elderly woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope when I thought all was lost," she said. "Thank you for showing me it's never too late." May's eyes shimmered. She realized her journey was no longer just her own. It was a collective anthem for anyone who had felt invisible or dismissed. Yet amid the public acclaim, May remained grounded by the quiet moments, the handwritten notes from strangers, the laughter of grandchildren, the stillness of dawn breaking over her garden. She knew the true work was not in accolades but in everyday acts of courage and kindness. One evening, May sat with Emily and her grandchildren beneath the stars, sharing stories and dreams. They talked about the future, not as a distant, uncertain horizon, but as a canvas waiting to be painted with bold strokes and gentle colors. May felt a deep peace settle within her, a sense of completion and beginning intertwined. The journey that had once seemed impossible was now a living testament to the power of belief and action. She whispered to the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to embrace the impossible." And with that, May stepped forward into the unfolding story, ready to inspire, to create, and to live with fearless heart and open arms, proof that age is not a barrier but a gateway to a new beginning. May's transformation had become a quiet revolution, one that rippled far beyond the walls of her small town. The invention, born from a flicker of hope and a refusal to surrender to age, was now touching lives in ways she never imagined. But as the device gained traction, May faced a new kind of challenge, the question of how to sustain this momentum without losing herself in the whirlwind. The summer sun filtered through the windows of her workshop as May sat with a stack of letters and emails from users, each story a testament to courage and change. Yet, beneath the gratitude and inspiration, she felt the weight of expectation pressing in. Could she continue to lead, to innovate, to inspire without faltering? One evening, May found herself scrolling through videos of Elon Musk's speeches and interviews. His relentless energy, his refusal to accept limits, his willingness to fail and try again, it all stirred something deep within her. But alongside admiration, May also sensed a quiet caution. Musk's journey was legendary, but it was also marked by relentless pace and enormous pressure. She realized she needed to find her own balance, a way to honor her spirit without burning out. With this clarity, May began to prioritize. She set boundaries around her work, carving out time for rest, reflection, and connection. She deepened her relationships with Emily and the grandchildren, savoring moments of laughter and tenderness that nourished her soul. She returned to the garden she loved, finding peace in the rhythm of planting and tending, a metaphor for the growth unfolding in her own life. At the same time, May continued to push the boundaries of her invention, collaborating with the university to expand its reach and capabilities. New features were added. Social connection tools that help seniors share stories and memories, gentle movement prompts tailored to individual abilities, and cognitive exercises designed to adapt and challenge users as they progressed. The community around the project grew, a tapestry of creators, users, and supporters bound by a shared mission to redefine aging. May's blog reflected this evolution, becoming a space of dialogue and mutual encouragement. She shared not just her successes but her struggles, inviting readers into the messy, beautiful process of transformation. The response was overwhelming. People from across the country wrote to say they felt seen, understood, and empowered. One letter, from a woman named Gloria, stood out. Gloria wrote about losing her husband to illness and feeling adrift in the years that followed. May's story had given her the courage to start a small art group at her senior center, rekindling joy and friendship. "You reminded me that life doesn't end with loss," Gloria wrote. "It begins again in ways we might not expect." These connections grounded May in a profound sense of purpose. She understood now that her journey was not about perfection or fame, but about authentic, imperfect courage. One crisp autumn afternoon, May was invited to a televised interview to share her story and the invention that had become a beacon for so many. The studio was bright and bustling, a world away from the quiet corners of her home. Yet, as the cameras rolled, May spoke with calm conviction, weaving her personal journey with universal truths about aging, resilience, and hope. "I was never too old," she told the audience, "I was just waiting to believe I mattered." The interview sparked renewed interest and opened new opportunities for collaboration and funding. Yet, May remained grounded by a simple truth she'd learned on her path: the most powerful invention was not a device, but the unyielding belief in one's capacity to change and grow. That evening, as she walked through her garden beneath a sky ablaze with stars, May felt the quiet joy of arrival, not at an end, but at a new beginning. The road ahead was still filled with unknowns, but she embraced it with open arms and fearless heart. She whispered to the night, "This is just the start." And with that, May stepped forward, an enduring spark of hope and transformation for all who dared to dream beyond their years. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? May's journey was no longer just a personal transformation, it had become a movement. The device she helped create was making waves, not only in local communities but across the country. Seniors who had once felt invisible were now sharing stories, rebuilding relationships, and reclaiming purpose. Yet May knew that true change required more than technology. It demanded a shift in mindset, a rebellion against the quiet despair society often imposed on those growing older. One crisp morning, May found herself standing before a packed community hall, invited to speak at a national aging conference. The room was filled with advocates, scientists, caregivers, and seniors, each person hungry for hope and solutions. As May looked over the faces, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves but also a profound sense of responsibility. "What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong?" she began, echoing the question that had sparked her own awakening years ago. She shared the raw truth of her journey, the loneliness, the fear, the doubts, and the radical choice to defy them. She spoke of Elon Musk's unyielding mindset, the courage to challenge limits and persist through failure. Her words painted a vivid picture of transformation, not as an abstract ideal but as a lived reality accessible to all. After her speech, a standing ovation filled the hall. People approached her, their eyes shining with gratitude and renewed hope. Among them was James, a retired firefighter who had lost his sense of purpose after leaving the force. "Your story gave me permission to start over," he said quietly. May's heart swelled with the recognition that her journey had become a beacon. Back home, May returned to the rhythm of creation and reflection. Her workshop buzzed with new prototypes, ideas fueled by feedback from users and collaborators. The device evolved to include features that fostered social engagement, virtual meetups, memory-sharing platforms, and creative challenges designed to spark joy and connection. May's blog blossomed into a vibrant community space where readers shared victories, struggles, and support. Letters and emails poured in, weaving a tapestry of human resilience. One evening, May received a message from a woman named Linda, who described how May's story had inspired her to learn guitar at 68. "I never thought I had it in me," Linda wrote. "But watching you, I realized it's never too late to find new passions." Moments like these filled May with deep gratitude and renewed energy. She realized that the invention was more than technology, it was a catalyst for reclaiming life's possibilities. Yet amid the triumphs, May remained grounded by the quiet moments, the soft breeze through her garden, the laughter of grandchildren, the steady beat of her own heart. She knew that transformation was a journey, not a destination. One chilly evening, May sat with Emily by the fireplace, their conversation weaving between past and future. Emily shared her hopes and fears, her dreams and doubts, and May listened with the tenderness of a mother and the wisdom of one who had walked through darkness into light. "You showed me how to keep going," Emily said softly. "Even when it feels impossible." May smiled, her heart full. She understood that her legacy was not just in the invention or the speeches, but in the lives she touched and the courage she inspired. As winter's first snow fell softly outside, May felt a quiet peace settle within her. The journey that had begun with a spark from Elon Musk's fearless example had blossomed into a blaze of hope for countless souls. She whispered to the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to believe I could still change the world." And with that, May embraced the unfolding horizon, ready to continue inspiring, creating, and living with fearless heart and open arms. May's invention was no longer just a tool, it had become a lifeline. As she traveled from city to city, visiting senior centers, hospitals, and community gatherings, she witnessed firsthand the profound impact it was making. Faces once marked by loneliness now lit up with curiosity and joy. Conversations sparked where silence had long prevailed. Connections rekindled across generations. One afternoon, May found herself sitting with a group of seniors in a sunlit room at a community center in Phoenix. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming desert flowers and the soft murmur of conversations. May watched as the group shared stories prompted by the device, memories of first loves, childhood adventures, and moments of courage. The room vibrated with a sense of shared humanity, bridging decades and experiences. Among them was Harold, a retired mechanic whose rough exterior belied a tender heart. "I didn't think anyone cared anymore," he confessed. "But this gives me a reason to keep going." May felt the familiar surge of emotion, the reminder that her journey was not just about technology but about restoring dignity and hope. Later that evening, back in her hotel room, May reflected on how far she had come. The woman who once feared fading into obscurity was now a beacon of transformation. Yet, despite the progress, she knew the road ahead held challenges. Society's attitudes toward aging were slow to change, and the technology, while powerful, was only a piece of a larger puzzle. May was determined to keep pushing boundaries, to amplify voices often ignored. She thought about Elon Musk's words, how fearlessness and relentless curiosity could disrupt even the most entrenched systems. Inspired, May began drafting a new vision, a nationwide initiative that combined technology, community engagement, and advocacy to reshape how America viewed and supported its elders. She reached out to partners. Nonprofits, healthcare providers, policymakers, building a coalition united by a shared mission. The work was demanding, filled with moments of frustration and triumph. May learned to navigate bureaucracy, balance competing priorities, and rally diverse stakeholders. Through it all, she held fast to the lessons she had learned, the power of persistence, the importance of empathy, and the courage to dream boldly. One evening, during a particularly grueling planning session, May looked around the room at the faces of her team, young and old, seasoned and new. She realized that the invention had done more than reconnect individuals, it had forged a community united by hope and action. That night, as she walked back to her hotel beneath a sky dusted with stars, May felt a profound sense of belonging. She whispered to the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to build something greater than myself." And with that, May stepped into the future, ready to lead, to inspire, and to keep rewriting the story of aging with fearless heart and open arms. May sat quietly in her modest living room, the soft glow of the evening sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The house was filled with the gentle hum of memories, some joyful, some tinged with regret, but all part of the tapestry of her life. Despite the growing recognition and success of the invention she helped create, May sometimes wrestled with an old, familiar question: was she truly making a difference, or was she just delaying the inevitable? That doubt, though fleeting, always returned like an unwelcome visitor. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings and public appearances, May found herself alone in the workshop. She ran her hands over the device's latest prototype, feeling the smooth curves beneath her fingers. This invention had become more than a project, it was a symbol of her resilience, her refusal to be sidelined by age. Yet, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more she could do. As May stared out the window at the quiet street beyond, her thoughts drifted to Elon Musk's words, how failure was just a step toward success, how boundaries existed to be challenged. It was this mindset that had propelled her forward, but now she sensed a new chapter was unfolding, one that required deeper courage and vulnerability. With a renewed sense of purpose, May decided to take a risk. She reached out to a community center in her town that served seniors struggling with isolation and depression. She proposed hosting a workshop. Not just about the device, but about storytelling, connection, and reclaiming purpose. The response was cautious but hopeful. On the day of the workshop, May arrived early, arranging chairs in a circle and setting out refreshments. As participants trickled in, she noticed the hesitance in their eyes, the fear that this was just another fleeting moment of attention. But May greeted each person with warmth and openness, sharing her own story of struggle and transformation. Slowly, the room began to soften. People shared fragments of their lives, losses, regrets, dreams deferred. May listened without judgment, her presence a balm to wounds often left unspoken. Then, with gentle encouragement, she introduced the device, not as a magic cure, but as a tool to spark memory, creativity, and connection. The group hesitated at first, but as laughter and stories emerged, a sense of belonging blossomed. Over the weeks, the workshop became a sanctuary, a place where seniors reclaimed their voices and rediscovered joy. May watched as participants began reaching out to family members, trying new hobbies, and stepping into new roles within their communities. One man, Walter, shared that after years of silence, he had written a letter to his estranged daughter. "I never thought I'd find the words," he said, tears in his eyes. "But this gave me hope." May felt a deep swell of emotion, realizing that her invention had sparked more than cognitive engagement, it had ignited healing and reconciliation. Yet, the journey was not without setbacks. Some days, old fears crept back, some nights, exhaustion threatened to dim her light. But each time, May remembered Elon Musk's fearless persistence, the idea that transformation was a series of small, brave steps forward. One evening, as May sat with Emily and the grandchildren by the fireplace, she shared the stories from the workshop, the triumphs and the challenges. Emily reached out, taking May's hand. "You've changed so many lives," she said softly. "Including mine." May smiled, the warmth of family grounding her amidst the whirlwind of change. She realized that legacy was not built in moments of grandeur, but in quiet acts of courage and love. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, May whispered to the stars, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to believe my story mattered." And with that, she embraced the path ahead, with fearless heart and open arms, ready to keep inspiring, creating, and living fully, no matter what the years held. May stood at the edge of the bustling city park, the late afternoon sun casting golden hues across the autumn leaves swirling at her feet. The crisp air was filled with the laughter of children, the chatter of families, and the distant hum of traffic. A symphony of life she hadn't always known how to be part of. For years, May had retreated into the quiet solitude of her home, the weight of lost dreams and fading relevance pressing down like an invisible shroud. But today was different. Today, she was here to lead a community event designed to bring seniors together, to celebrate resilience and connection through the invention that had transformed her own life. As people arrived, May noticed the mix of curiosity and hesitation in their eyes. Some shuffled in with canes or walkers, others leaned on the support of friends or family. She greeted each with a warm smile and a gentle word, sensing the collective longing for purpose and belonging. The event began with May sharing her story, not as a polished speech, but as a heartfelt conversation. She spoke of fear and isolation, of the moment she found Elon Musk's words and felt the spark ignite. "What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong?" she asked. "What if the best chapters were still unwritten?" The crowd leaned in, drawn by the honesty and hope in her voice. May demonstrated the device, inviting participants to engage with its prompts. Memories resurfaced, laughter erupted, tears glistened in the afternoon light. Stories flowed freely, tales of first jobs, cherished friendships, moments of courage. The park seemed to breathe with the energy of rediscovered life. Among the attendees was Ruth, a widow who had spent years withdrawn after her husband's passing. With trembling hands, she shared how the event had rekindled a desire to reconnect with her community and even start painting again. "I forgot how much I loved color," she said, eyes shining. May's heart swelled with the knowledge that her journey had become a beacon for others walking through their own darkness. As the sun dipped lower, the group gathered around a fire pit, sharing songs and stories under a canopy of stars. May felt a profound sense of belonging, a tapestry woven from courage, vulnerability, and shared humanity. Later that night, alone in her room, May reflected on the day's magic. The invention had brought people together, but it was the collective spirit, the willingness to embrace change and connection, that made the real difference. She thought again of Elon Musk's relentless drive, his fearless embrace of the unknown. May understood now that transformation was not a solitary act but a shared journey. The next morning, May woke early, the first light filtering softly through the curtains. She pulled on her jacket and stepped outside, the crisp air filling her lungs with promise. Walking through the quiet streets, she felt the pulse of a city alive with possibility. She was no longer the woman who feared fading away. She was a catalyst, a storyteller, a force for change. May whispered to the dawn, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to step into the light." And with that, she stepped forward, ready to inspire, to create, and to live boldly, proof that age is not a limit but a gateway to new beginnings. May stood in the quiet of her workshop, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating scattered sketches and circuit boards. The invention had grown far beyond its original form, evolving with every story shared, every challenge faced. But tonight, May wrestled with a new kind of uncertainty, the fear that she might have reached the peak of her journey, that the spark that had fueled her transformation might flicker out. As she traced her fingers over the device's latest prototype, May's mind drifted to Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of innovation, his refusal to accept the status quo. She remembered his words about failure being a necessary step toward greatness, and the courage it took to keep going when the world doubts you. Inspired but restless, May decided it was time to push herself again, not just as an inventor, but as a storyteller and advocate. She began drafting a plan to bring her message to a broader audience, to challenge societal perceptions of aging on a national scale. With the support of her team, May arranged a speaking tour, reaching out to senior centers, universities, and conferences. Each stop was a new opportunity to connect, to listen, and to inspire. In a small town library, May met Richard, a retired teacher who confided that he had felt invisible since leaving the classroom. May shared her own struggles and triumphs, and together they dreamed of ways to create community spaces where seniors could continue to teach, learn, and grow. Across the country, at a bustling university auditorium, May spoke to students and faculty about the power of intergenerational connection and the limitless potential of the human spirit. She challenged them to rethink aging not as decline but as a season of renewal. Along the way, May's invention became a symbol, not just of technology, but of possibility and defiance. Letters flooded in from people who had taken small steps toward change, learning a new skill, reaching out to a loved one, embracing life with renewed vigor. May kept each note close, a reminder that transformation was deeply personal and universally powerful. Back home, May found solace in simple pleasures. Tending her garden, sharing meals with Emily and the grandchildren, quiet evenings by the fire. These moments grounded her, fueling the resilience needed for the journey ahead. One evening, as the stars blanketed the sky, May sat on her porch, reflecting on how far she had come. The woman who once felt forgotten and powerless was now a beacon of hope for countless others. She whispered into the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to believe in the power of my own story." And with that, May embraced the unknown future with open arms and fearless heart, ready to continue inspiring, creating, and living fully, proof that age is not a barrier but a gateway to boundless possibility. May awoke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through lace curtains, the quiet stillness of her home a gentle contrast to the whirlwind that had become her life. The invention had grown from a simple idea sparked by a restless heart into a movement that was changing lives. Yet amid the acclaim and activity, May felt a new stirring, a longing to reconnect with her own roots, to find meaning beyond the applause and screens. She decided to take a trip back to her hometown, a place that held the echoes of her past and the memories of who she once was. The journey was bittersweet, each mile traveled a thread weaving past and present. As May stepped onto the familiar streets, she was greeted by the crisp scent of pine and the soft murmur of the creek that had been a childhood refuge. Faces from long ago smiled with recognition, some surprised, others warm with welcome. May visited the old family home, now weathered but standing resilient against the passage of time. She walked through rooms where dreams were born and lost, where laughter and tears had carved invisible marks in the air. Sitting on the porch, May felt the weight of years and the quiet strength that comes from survival. She thought about the regrets she had carried, missed opportunities, estranged relationships, dreams deferred. But she also saw the seeds of growth those years had planted. In the local community center, May shared her story with old friends and neighbors, not as a famous inventor but as a woman who had dared to believe she still mattered. The response was humbling, tears, hugs, and stories exchanged, a testament to the power of connection and the enduring human spirit. Among the conversations, May reconnected with John, a childhood friend who had walked beside her through many of life's twists and turns. Their reunion was a balm to old wounds, a chance to forgive and embrace the present. John's quiet strength reminded May that support and love were vital parts of transformation. As the days passed, May found herself walking the trails she had once roamed as a girl, the landscape both changed and unchanged. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from loneliness and fear to purpose and hope. She realized that the invention was just one chapter in a much larger story about resilience, love, and the courage to keep moving forward. One evening, under a sky awash with stars, May sat by the creek, the water's gentle song a lullaby for her soul. She whispered into the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to come home, to myself." And with that, May embraced the healing power of the past and the endless promise of tomorrow, ready to carry her story forward with fearless heart and open arms. May returned from her hometown journey carrying a quiet peace she hadn't felt in years. The echoes of old memories mingled with the vibrant pulse of new beginnings. She knew her mission was far from over, the invention had sparked hope for many, but the deeper work was about changing hearts and minds, starting with her own and radiating outward. One crisp morning, May sat in her garden, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly turned earth. She watched as a group of volunteers arrived, ready to help organize a new program she had envisioned, Voices of Experience, a storytelling initiative where seniors could share their journeys, wisdom, and dreams. The program aimed to bridge generations, dismantling stereotypes about aging and showing the world that life's later years could be a vibrant, dynamic chapter. May felt a thrill of anticipation and nervousness as the first gathering began. The community center buzzed with energy, seniors mingling with local youth, cameras and notebooks poised to capture stories waiting to be told. May opened the event by sharing a simple truth: our stories matter. They are the threads that connect us, the light that guides us forward. One by one, participants stood to share, from tales of overcoming hardship to lessons learned through love and loss. The room filled with laughter, tears, and moments of profound connection. Among the speakers was Helen, a woman who had reinvented herself after a devastating health crisis, now pursuing painting and poetry with fiery passion. Her story inspired many, including young listeners who saw aging not as an endpoint but as a new beginning. As the weeks passed, the initiative blossomed into a community force. Schools invited seniors to speak, local media covered the movement, and bonds formed across generations. May marveled at the transformation, not just in others, but within herself. She was no longer just the inventor or the speaker, she was a catalyst for change, a living testament to the power of hope and action. One afternoon, as May prepared to speak at a national conference on aging, she reflected on the long road that had brought her here, the doubts, the fears, the moments when giving up seemed easier. She thought about Elon Musk's fearless challenge to the impossible, the way he had shattered limits and inspired millions. May realized that, like him, she had become a rebel, not against the world, but against the idea that age should define or limit one's worth. On stage, May's voice carried the weight and warmth of experience as she spoke directly to hearts often silenced by society's neglect. She urged her audience to embrace radical hope, to see aging as a canvas of endless possibilities rather than a fading shadow. After the speech, a young woman approached, eyes bright with tears. "You gave me permission to dream again," she said. "To believe that my life still matters." May smiled, feeling the circle of inspiration widen, a ripple spreading through time and space. That night, alone with her thoughts, May looked out over the quiet neighborhood, the stars twinkling like distant promises. She whispered softly, "I was never too old. I was just waiting to claim my place in this story." And with that, she settled into a profound sense of purpose, ready to keep forging new paths, breaking barriers, and living with fearless heart and open arms. May stood before the packed auditorium, the soft hum of anticipation mingling with the faint scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. This was the culmination of a journey that had begun years ago in a small, quiet workshop, a journey sparked by fear, doubt, and the bold words of a man who dared to dream beyond limits. Today, May was not just an inventor or a speaker, she was a symbol of transformation, proof that age was not a prison but a gateway to freedom and possibility. As the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd, May took a deep breath and began. She spoke of loss and loneliness, of the weight of years that threatened to silence her voice. She shared the moment she heard Elon Musk challenge the world to defy expectations and how that challenge became the spark that lit her path. The audience leaned in, drawn by the raw honesty and the undeniable power of hope. May recounted the struggles and small victories, the invention that connected hearts, the workshops that rekindled dreams, the friendships renewed, and the legacy being forged not in grand monuments but in everyday acts of courage. She told stories of people who had found new purpose in their later years, who had rewritten their own narratives and shattered the chains of invisibility. Throughout her speech, the auditorium transformed from a passive space into a living, breathing testament to resilience. Faces glistened with tears, hands clutched, hearts opened. May knew that this moment was bigger than herself, it was a movement, a declaration that no one was ever truly too old to change, to create, to matter. After she finished, the applause was thunderous, not just for the words spoken but for the truth embodied. May stepped off the stage, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers united by a common belief in second chances. Emily hugged her tightly, the grandchildren's eyes shining with pride. May felt a profound peace settle within her, the kind that comes from knowing she had lived fully and fearlessly. Later that night, as the world outside hushed into sleep, May sat by the window, the city lights twinkling like stars brought close. She whispered to the night sky, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And in that moment, May understood that her story was not just an ending but a new beginning, a legacy of hope, courage, and the unstoppable power of the human spirit. With fearless heart and open arms, she was ready to keep inspiring, creating, and living fully, proof that the greatest inventions are not machines but the transformations within ourselves. The air was quiet that morning, soft and golden, the way it sometimes gets when life pauses just enough for you to notice the beauty of it. May sat on her porch, wrapped in her favorite knitted shawl, sipping black coffee from a mug that read, "Not done yet." The phrase had started as a joke from Emily, but over time, it had become her motto. And on this particular morning, it felt truer than ever. It had been 6 months since her speech at the auditorium. The invention had gone global, translated, distributed, adapted in ways she couldn't have imagined. In Japan, it was being used in elderly care centers to connect generations through shared storytelling. In Sweden, doctors were studying its effects on cognitive health. In small towns across America, older adults were meeting weekly in groups sparked by her story, her journey, her refusal to be forgotten. But success hadn't changed May. Not in the way people assumed it would. She still lived in the same house with the creaky floorboards and the ivy climbing up the porch rails. She still tended her garden every morning, even if her knees complained louder now. She still spent Sundays cooking with Emily and the grandkids, their laughter echoing through the kitchen like the best kind of music. What had changed was inside her. The weight of invisibility, of thinking her best years were behind her, was gone. And what had taken its place wasn't arrogance or pride, it was clarity. A calm, rooted confidence that her life still had meaning. That her voice mattered. That she had earned every wrinkle, every story, and every right to live boldly. She had recently started writing a book, not a memoir exactly, but a blend of personal stories, lessons learned, and prompts for others to reflect on their own lives. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about making space for people to realize they weren't finished yet either. That book, slowly typed out each morning with shaking fingers and long pauses for thought, was her next invention. One afternoon, while editing a chapter about regret and reconciliation, May received a call from someone she hadn't heard from in over 20 years, her sister, Anne. Their relationship had broken down after their mother's death, years of silence growing like thick vines between them. May's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear, unsure if the voice on the other end was real. "I saw your interview on PBS," Anne said quietly. "And I cried. You said something about healing not having a deadline, and I guess I was hoping you'd believe that too." May didn't speak for a moment, letting the pain and beauty of those words settle into her chest. Then, softly, she replied, "I do believe that." They talked for 2 hours that day. And then again the next. Slowly, carefully, they began to unravel the past, not to forget it, but to understand it. Forgiveness, May learned, didn't need to come all at once. It could arrive like a sunrise, slowly, then all at once, bathing everything in a new kind of light. Meanwhile, May was asked to be part of a global aging summit hosted in London, where world leaders, scientists, artists, and activists would gather to discuss the future of aging. She hesitated at first, worried about the travel, the crowds, the pressure. But Emily gave her that look, the same one she'd given when she encouraged May to build the first prototype. "You're the voice they need," she said. "You're the reminder that it's not about adding years to life, it's about adding life to years." May accepted the invitation. The flight was long and exhausting, but she spent it watching documentaries and scribbling notes in her journal. When she arrived, the staff welcomed her like royalty, though she gently reminded them that she was still just May from Kansas. The summit was breathtaking. People from every continent, each carrying stories of struggle and triumph. May met a woman from Ghana who had taught herself to read at 72. A man from Brazil who started a literacy program for seniors after retiring from construction. An elderly couple from Norway who'd walked across their country hand in hand to raise awareness for dementia. May's keynote address was the final event. As she stood at the podium, lights warm on her face, she looked out over a sea of faces, young, old, tired, hopeful. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. She spoke from her heart. I used to think I was waiting for the world to remember me, she began. But the truth is, I was waiting to remember myself. I thought my value was tied to youth, to usefulness as defined by others. But what I learned, what I had to fight to learn, is that purpose doesn't retire. It evolves. She paused, scanning the audience. Elon Musk once said, "Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster." At first, I thought he was talking about technology. But now I know, he was talking about people too. About aging. About our willingness to change when the world tells us not to. I am 77 years old, and I have never felt more alive. Thunderous applause erupted. Not polite, not obligatory, real, emotional, grateful applause. May smiled but didn't cry. She had already shed those tears in silence, in the dark corners of her life that no longer defined her. When she returned home, jet-lagged but full of fire, the first thing May did was walk barefoot into her garden. The roses were in bloom, the soil warm beneath her feet. She stood still, letting the wind brush past her face, listening to the distant sound of children playing. Life continued. Life always continued. She finished her book a few weeks later. On the final page, she wrote, in neat, deliberate script. You are not too late. You are not too old. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. She thought about all the people who would read those words. The ones sitting in silence at kitchen tables, wondering if anyone still saw them. The ones looking at their reflection, searching for the person they used to be. The ones who needed a spark. A nudge. A whisper that said, start again. You're allowed. May closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, sunlight warming her face through the window. Her house was quiet, her phone silent. But inside her, there was a symphony. Not of noise, but of life. Lived. Earned. Ongoing. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered, thank you. Not to anyone in particular. Just, to life itself. For being patient. For waiting for her to catch up. She rose, stretched her aching back, and walked toward the kitchen where a pot of soup simmered on the stove. Tomorrow, there would be more to do. More letters to answer. More garden to tend. More stories to collect and share. But tonight, as the sun dipped low and the wind carried the smell of lilacs through the window, May felt complete. Not finished. Just, deeply, quietly whole. Because the truth was simple, and she had finally learned to believe it. She was never too old. She was just waiting to be free. The morning sun spilled gently across the small wooden porch, casting long, golden shadows on the ground as May tucked a sprig of rosemary into her front pocket and stepped out into the quiet. The air was brisk but carried a soft warmth underneath, like the world itself was exhaling slowly. Everything felt still. But not empty. It was the kind of stillness that follows a life well lived, the hush that comes after a final note of a beautiful song. Today was May's 80th birthday. There were no balloons strung across the porch, no parade or media coverage. Instead, the celebration was quiet and intentional, just the way she wanted it. Her garden bloomed behind her, wild and free, tulips dancing among strawberries, sunflowers rising bold and tall behind mint and thyme. A single banner hung across her front door. In hand-painted lettering, it read, "Becoming never ends." Inside the house, the smell of cinnamon and baked apples drifted from the oven. Emily was in the kitchen with the grandkids, teaching them how to fold the edges of a pie crust the way May had taught her. The sounds of laughter and flowery chaos filled the house, grounding it in a familiar comfort. May paused on the porch steps, watching the world around her. A young couple walked by with their baby in a stroller. A man jogged past with a dog. The neighbor's boy waved from across the street. Life pulsed forward. She felt no urge to keep up with it. She was in it, part of it, like a root that held the ground steady beneath the rush of everything else. Over the past 2 years, the invention had taken on a life of its own. Universities were studying it. Retirement communities built entire programs around it. Children were recording their grandparents' stories, teachers were using it in classrooms to teach empathy and history in a single breath. But what May cared about most wasn't the device anymore. It wasn't the media interviews, or even the awards she'd reluctantly accepted. It was the ripple she couldn't measure, the quiet lives changed in places she'd never see. People had begun writing her letters, not emails, but handwritten notes. Some were mailed from across the globe, others slipped under her front door from local friends. One from a Vietnam veteran in Ohio read, "Your invention helped me remember my wife's voice again." Another from a teenage girl in Utah said, "My grandma never talked about her past until now. I had no idea she was a poet." May kept every letter in a wooden box beside her bed. She never read them all at once. She'd pick one at night, like a prayer. On her birthday morning, she opened one more. It was from a woman in Oregon, handwritten on soft blue paper. It read, "I was ready to give up. Truly. Then I heard your story. And I decided to try again. Just one more day." That one day turned into a week. That week turned into a dream. "I opened a bookstore last month. I'm 72. May closed her eyes, held the paper to her chest, and whispered, "That's it. That's why." She thought back to the first time she'd seen Elon Musk on that old screen. How strange it had felt to find inspiration not in someone like her, but someone utterly different, famous, fast-moving, untouchable. But that spark he lit wasn't about being like him. It was about remembering she was still capable of becoming. His fearlessness had given her permission to try. And she had run with it, not to space, but into the soul. Into the places society said she was no longer allowed to go. That was the real rebellion. The afternoon arrived with guests filtering into the yard, folding chairs being arranged under the shade trees. Old friends came, people from her early life, neighbors, former colleagues who had reconnected after reading her story. Ruth arrived with a new watercolor portrait of May, painted with the soft, careful hands of someone who knew the wrinkles by heart. Richard from the local veterans group brought a guitar and strummed a song he'd written for her. "She's not fading, she's flying." And even John, her childhood friend, now weathered but still witty, gave a toast that had everyone in tears and laughter all at once. After dinner, as the sun began to dip behind the trees and fireflies began their soft dance across the lawn, May stood up slowly, a hush falling over the yard. She looked around, at faces that aged alongside her and faces that still had the gleam of youth in their eyes. She cleared her throat gently and spoke. "I used to think birthdays after 70 didn't matter much. You're just happy to wake up and still remember where your keys are. But this one matters. Not because of the number, but because I finally understand something I didn't know when I was younger: becoming doesn't stop. Not at 60. Not at 70. Not even at 80. She looked over at Emily, who stood beside her now, holding her hand. "There's no finish line to the soul," May said. "You don't arrive. You unfold." She gestured toward the grandchildren, who were giggling near the garden's edge. "And we're not just here to pass on memories. We're here to pass on courage. The kind of courage that doesn't just push rockets into space, but the kind that wakes up each morning, alone and aching, and still chooses to begin again." There were tears in the crowd. Not of sadness, but of recognition. Of release. Of hope. As the stars began to shimmer overhead, someone turned on a soft melody from a speaker, a song from May's youth, and without needing to be asked, people began to dance. Not wildly, but slowly. Meaningfully. As if each step forward was a declaration, I'm still here. I'm still becoming. May sat back down on her porch, a blanket over her lap, and watched them all. She didn't need to be in the center anymore. She had become the roots, the steady ground, the quiet strength that allowed others to rise. That was legacy, not something engraved on a plaque, but something planted deep in others, quietly growing, long after you're gone. Emily sat beside her, resting her head on May's shoulder. You okay? Emily asked softly. May smiled, eyes glistening. I'm more than okay, she said. I'm finally whole. They sat together in silence, watching stars appear one by one. Later that night, when the house had quieted and the garden had returned to stillness, May stood once more in her workshop. The invention sat on the table, its light soft, pulsing like a heartbeat. She reached out and placed her hand gently on it. You did good, she whispered. We did good. Then she turned off the light, closed the door behind her, and walked slowly back into her life, not finished, not final, but fearlessly, fully hers. Because she was never too old. She was just getting started. The morning after May's birthday felt different. Not quieter, quiet had become a trusted friend, but somehow more expansive. As if the air itself had shifted, making space for something she couldn't yet name. She sat by her bedroom window, a cup of green tea cradled in her hands, listening to the distant hum of the neighborhood waking up. Emily had left early with the kids to let May rest, but she hadn't slept in. She didn't want to. Something stirred inside her again, an itch she hadn't felt in years. Not the kind that says, slow down. The kind that says, there's more. She walked slowly to the workshop. The same one that, years ago, had held the first pieces of her invention. She hadn't been in there since her birthday celebration. Dust had begun to gather on the windowsills, and a faint scent of wood shaving still lingered in the air. May stood in the center of the room and ran her fingers across the old workbench. Then, carefully, she reached for the device, her invention. It sat like a trusted companion, its soft blue light still blinking, as if waiting. Not for commands. But for possibility. She turned it on. The interface had changed since she first built it. Over the years, developers and engineers had polished it, improved it, made it more intuitive. But the heart of it was still hers. The screen glowed, and the first prompt appeared. What memory do you want to revisit today? May smiled. Let's try something different, she whispered. She began typing, not into the prompt box, but into her laptop. New ideas. Not just for the device itself, but for a new version entirely. Something simpler. More emotional. Less focused on memory, more focused on legacy. Not just recalling the past, but reshaping how people saw their future. That afternoon, she called her friend Thomas, the retired software engineer who had helped her build the early beta versions. I think I want to try something, she said. You're 80, Thomas replied, dryly. Don't you ever run out of steam? Not even close, May laughed. By the following week, her living room had turned into a temporary design lab again. Emily shook her head when she saw the blueprints spread across the dining table. You really don't believe in retirement, do you? She asked. May looked up from her sketchpad, pencil tucked behind one ear. Why retire from becoming? The new idea wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant for mass production or media headlines. It was something quieter, an intimate companion for the aging soul. A life capsule, as she called it. It would record voice memos, thoughts, fragments of dreams, lessons, and hopes. Not to be played back to the user, but left behind, as a gift for those who came after. Instead of looking backward, it would help people speak forward. It would ask simple but profound questions. what do you wish your children knew about you? What part of your life do you wish you had lived louder? What do you forgive yourself for? And then, it would listen. Just listen. May called it Echo. At first, she worked quietly, only sharing the concept with a handful of trusted people, Thomas, Ruth, John. She tested it with a small group at the community center. The results surprised even her. People cried. People laughed. One woman said it was the first time she had told someone she had always regretted not becoming a musician. A man revealed his biggest secret, that he never stopped loving the girl he left behind in 1969. And May realized something powerful: Echo wasn't about legacy at all. It was about unburdening. It was about freedom. She began gathering stories again, not to publish, not to go viral, but to understand. Each person who used Echo left behind not just facts or memories, but heartbeats, emotional fingerprints that wouldn't disappear after they were gone. May started calling them living echoes. They would carry forward like whispered songs. Not loud, but unforgettable. And something else happened May hadn't expected. People started asking her if they could record messages for themselves, not to be played later by someone else, but by themselves, years from now. As if they were planting reminders for the future. Don't forget how brave you were this year. You mattered to someone even when you felt invisible. Don't listen to the noise. You're still the one steering the ship. May smiled every time a new, future letter came in. Echo was becoming more than a tool, it was becoming a mirror. A place where aging wasn't defined by fading, but by unfolding. Months passed. Seasons turned. May stayed busy, but not frantic. She took naps in the sun. She let herself enjoy long walks. She wrote thank you letters by hand and left them on strangers' porches. She found balance, not in slowing down, but in choosing her pace. And one evening, as the fireflies danced again outside her window, she opened Echo and recorded something for herself. She spoke slowly, clearly, her voice soft but certain. Hello, May. I hope you're hearing this sometime when you need reminding. That you mattered. That your words helped. That your courage created doors where there were once only walls. I hope you remember the way the world opened up when you stopped waiting for permission. I hope you know that your life was never measured in headlines or applause, but in the quiet way someone looked at you and felt seen. Keep going. Or keep resting. Whatever you choose, is enough. She pressed save. The next day, May visited a school nearby where students were learning how to interview older adults using her tools. A young girl, no more than 10, asked May a question that caught her completely off guard. Miss May, she said. Are you proud of yourself? May paused. It wasn't something she'd ever been directly asked. She looked at the girl, really looked at her. Then she nodded. Yes. I am. Not because I changed the world. But because I stopped believing I was done. The little girl smiled, scribbled something into her journal, then gave May a hug. May sat in her garden that evening, the wind gentle through the sunflowers, the horizon bathed in soft orange light. Her knees ached. Her eyes were tired. But her soul. Alive. On fire, even. Becoming. Not finished. Not ever. She watched the sky turn. The stars arrive. She thought about all the stories that still lived inside people, waiting, pressing, dreaming. And she knew one truth better than anything else now. It was never too late. Not to change. Not to heal. Not to create. Not to love. Not to begin. And with that final thought, May whispered, almost to herself, but also to the world. I am still becoming. Then she closed her eyes, smiled gently, and let the night hold her. The train moved steadily across the Kansas plains, cutting through fields bathed in golden light. May sat by the window, her hands folded in her lap, a small notebook resting beside her. She had chosen the train on purpose. Planes were faster, but they rushed everything. The train gave her time to watch, to think, to listen to the world outside. She was headed west, to California, for a conference she never expected to be invited to, the future of human potential. She would be speaking alongside scientists, entrepreneurs, and thinkers decades younger than her. And yet, none of it felt out of place. Not anymore. She adjusted the lapel pin on her blazer, a tiny silver rocket Emily had given her after her first public speech years ago. To remind you, her daughter had said, that you launched something bigger than you realize. May smiled at the memory. She had never wanted fame. Only purpose. And yet, somehow, her quiet persistence had rippled across the country, even the world. Echo was now used in thousands of communities, from nursing homes in rural towns to tech-driven cities that had forgotten the beauty of slowing down. The conductor tipped his hat as he passed her. "Afternoon, Ms. May," he said kindly. She nodded in return. Small gestures like that reminded her who she was. Not a headline. Not a statistic. A person. A woman who had dared to begin again when the world told her to sit still. She glanced down at her notebook and jotted a sentence. "You are never behind. You're just waiting for the right moment to say yes to yourself." It had become a kind of motto, not just for her, but for the hundreds of letters she still received weekly. People telling her how they'd started painting again. How they reconciled with lost children. How they took their first college class at 73. How they forgave themselves. How they finally believed their story mattered. She arrived in California to warm breezes and curious stares. The hotel lobby was a hub of high-energy youth, conference staff in sneakers and hoodies, checking badges, prepping stages, buzzing from caffeine and ambition. May stepped into it with quiet poise. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to remind. To root the room in truth. Backstage, she waited for her introduction. She could hear snippets of the speaker before her, something about AI and neural integration. Big ideas. Dazzling vocabulary. And then came her name. "Please welcome May Ellison, inventor, author, and founder of Echo, the platform that's redefining what it means to grow older." Polite applause turned to something warmer as she stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, but she could still see the silhouettes of faces, young, curious, slightly skeptical. She didn't begin with a quote. Or a data point. Or a flashy slide. She began with a story. "When I was 67, she said, I sat alone in my garage, wondering if anyone would ever hear me again. My husband was gone. My body was slower. My world had gotten very quiet. I didn't want to change the world. I just wanted to feel connected to it." She told them how the invention started. How it wasn't about technology at all, but about memory. Emotion. Permission. She talked about Elon Musk, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol. He once said, she continued, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." That stayed with me. Because I realized, I was important enough. Even if no one else saw it yet. The room leaned in. I didn't need the world to applaud me. I needed to remember that I could still begin again. She shared how Echo wasn't about reliving the past, but healing it. Reframing it. Passing it forward. She played a clip, a voice of an 84-year-old man leaving a message for his younger self. The crowd was silent, moved. When her talk ended, there was a long, still pause. Then a standing ovation, not just for her words, but for the life behind them. For the defiance of expectation. The courage to create without permission. Backstage, a young man approached her, maybe in his early 20s. He had tears in his eyes. "My grandma helped raise me," he said. "She passed 2 years ago. I think you just helped me hear her again. May placed a hand on his shoulder. She's still in you, she said softly. Echoes don't die. They just change shape. That evening, May returned to her hotel room and opened the window. The sound of the city pulsed faintly below, horns, footsteps, music. But above it all, the stars. Constant. Quiet. Present. She picked up her pen and wrote another note in her notebook. The future doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to the brave. The next morning, she joined a small panel discussion. Instead of sitting at the center, she chose a chair at the edge of the circle. She listened more than she spoke. And when asked what the next 10 years might look like for her, she smiled and answered. Honestly, I have no idea. But I've stopped needing the full map. One step at a time has gotten me this far. The room laughed gently. But beneath the laughter was something deeper, respect. After the conference, May spent 3 more days in California. She visited a small center where Echo was being used with terminal patients. One woman, aged 91, had recorded her life story not to leave behind for family, but for herself. It helps me remember that I was a fighter, she told May. And if I was once, maybe I still am. May nodded, tears in her eyes. You are. She sat with the woman for hours, not as a guest of honor, but as a friend. A witness. Before May left, the woman whispered, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not done." May didn't need to say anything. She just squeezed her hand. When she finally returned home, the garden was in bloom again. The wild roses had returned, taller this year. The air smelled like earth and something new. She stepped out of the car and just stood still, letting it all sink in. Emily met her at the front door, arms wide. "How was it?" she asked. May smiled. "It wasn't about what I said. It was about what people remembered in themselves when I did." That night, they had dinner under the stars again, just like her birthday. No event. No audience. Just family. Just life. As the plates were cleared and the candles flickered low, Emily looked over and said, "You're not done, are you?" May chuckled. "Not by a long shot." Then she stood up, slow but steady, and walked inside. She had another idea. Something small, something next. A program for rural schools. A bridge between elders and children. No tech. Just conversation. Just the next echo. And as the house settled into quiet, and the wind danced across the porch, May sat by her desk and wrote one last note for the night. There is no final chapter. Only pages waiting to be turned. And then, smiling, she turned out the light. The morning came slowly, wrapped in a gentle fog that curled around the trees like a memory. May stood in her garden, arms crossed softly over her chest, as the sun began to push its golden fingertips through the mist. The soil beneath her bare feet was cool, familiar, grounding. It had been exactly 5 years since she first powered on the invention, 5 years since she'd asked herself the quiet, trembling question, what if I'm not done? Today, she had her answer. Behind her, the house buzzed with preparation. Emily was inside, placing chairs in a semicircle, setting out teacups and little handwritten name tags. This wasn't a ceremony or a press event. It was something simpler, and maybe more powerful. A gathering. May had invited 12 women from her small town, each over 65, each quietly brilliant in ways the world didn't often celebrate. Some had been teachers. Some were grandmothers, nurses, librarians. One was a retired mechanic. Another had once dreamed of being a jazz singer. All of them carried stories that hadn't yet been told out loud. May had called the group the Second Flame. It wasn't about reinventing themselves. It wasn't about starting over. It was about continuing forward, fully lit, fully alive, even when the world said the fire had burned out. As the women arrived, one by one, May greeted each with a warm hug and a simple phrase, "Welcome back to yourself." That was the point of all this. Not to build something new, but to remember what had always been there. They gathered in the living room, seated in a circle, the windows open to the sounds of wind chimes and rustling leaves. No agenda. No speeches. Just a question, written on a note card May passed to each of them. "What part of you have you been saving for later?" At first, there was silence. That kind of heavy silence that only exists when the truth is knocking softly at the door. Then, finally, Ruth spoke. "My singing voice," she said, eyes down. "I used to sing in high school. Got a scholarship, even. But then life happened. Bills. Babies. You know the story." May nodded. What would it take to bring that voice back? Ruth looked up. Maybe just someone asking the question. They went around the circle. One woman said she had been saving her photography. Another said she still wanted to learn how to dance. One said she missed writing letters, real ones, with stamps and ink and love in every word. May listened to each answer like a sacred confession. She didn't interrupt. She didn't coach. She just held space. After they spoke, May introduced them to Echo. Not the version the world knew. A newer one. Smaller, simpler, with just one button and one question: what do you want to leave behind? The women held the devices in their hands like stones warmed by the sun. May explained, "You don't have to be a writer. You don't need to prepare. Just speak. To yourself. To your younger self. Or to someone you love. These are not answers. These are echoes. And they matter more than you know." That afternoon, as the group dispersed, each woman took a device with her. There were no promises, no deadlines. Only the invitation to begin again. May sat alone on the porch after they left, the sun now high above, burning off the last traces of fog. She rocked slowly in her chair, the wooden boards beneath her creaking like an old song. For years, she had asked herself whether aging was a process of loss or of discovery. She now believed it was both. But if you kept your heart open long enough, the discoveries outweighed the losses. Later that week, May received her first recording back from the Second Flame group. Ruth had submitted a song. It was raw, unpolished, but her voice trembled with life. In the background, May could hear a piano being played softly, probably by her granddaughter. "I almost didn't send this," Ruth had written in the file name. "But then I remembered what you said, unfinished doesn't mean unworthy." May wept when she heard it. And so began a new chapter May hadn't planned for, curating these voices. Sharing them. With permission, she compiled the echoes into a podcast, Aging Out Loud. Each episode was just one voice. One story. One moment of truth. No music. No intro. Just the human heart speaking plainly. The response stunned her. Listeners poured in, some young, some old, all hungry for something real. Comments flooded in from around the world. "This made me call my mom. I never thought aging could feel powerful. I'm 70, and I thought it was too late to matter. I was wrong." But May didn't get caught up in the noise. Her satisfaction came in the silences, in knowing that when someone sat alone at their kitchen table, wondering if they were too late, a quiet voice could arrive in their ears and say, "You're not. You're exactly on time." Meanwhile, Emily had taken a leap of her own. Inspired by her mother, she left her corporate job and opened a small creative retreat space behind the house. She called it the Green Room, a place where people over 60 could come to paint, write, garden, and simply be. "I spent so long trying to prove myself," she told May one night. "Now I just want to create space for others to remember who they are." May felt pride so deep it hurt. Then, one crisp morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a simple card and a printed quote. "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Elon Musk. And beneath it, in handwriting that felt oddly familiar. "I finally understand what you did, May. Thank you for showing me how to live forward." May stared at the note for a long time. She didn't know who sent it. Maybe it was from someone in the tech world. Maybe from a stranger. Or maybe, just maybe, from someone who had once inspired her, and now found inspiration in return. She folded the card and placed it in the same box where she kept her earliest sketches, her first prototype designs, her first rejection letter from a tech grant that said, "too small scale to be viable." She laughed softly. Viable, she thought. They had no idea. That evening, as the stars bloomed across the darkening sky, May recorded one final entry into her own echo. Not for anyone else. For herself. "I used to think becoming was about arriving," she said. "But now I know it's just about continuing. I am 82 years old. And every day, I am still becoming." She paused. "And if anyone hears this, years from now, let it remind you, there is no expiration date on purpose. Only on fear." She saved the file. Closed the device. Set it gently beside her bed. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The chimes sang. The night held her. And May, ever curious, ever alive, leaned into the dark with a heart wide open to whatever would come next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?